What about pterygium? What and where is it? This is a question that many ask after my last episode. As you know, I'm on a quest to search out all the newest facts about nail anatomy. To do so, I'm working with world-class medical experts and internationally known nail educators, in addition to constantly reviewing scientific reports and books. In this update, I'd like to share some new information in hopes of ending the confusion about the basic structure of a natural nail. Now, this is the second in a series about nail anatomy. The first one was introduced in the last episode. You can find a downloadable PDF of that whole script called What's New in Nail Anatomy, April 2019, at my website, www.dougschoon.com. Lots of other articles there as well, so please have a look. Now, in the last episode, I showed a nail cross-section diagram and that revealed much about the natural nail, including the source of the cuticle tissue. Recall that the cuticle comes from a very thin layer of stem cells found on the underside of the proximal nail fold, also known as the PNF. Please review the last episode if this doesn't sound familiar to you. The proximal nail fold is the entire flap of skin covering the matrix. It extends from the, the edge of the visible edge of the nail plate to the first joint of the finger. And I told you in the last episode, eponychium basically means upon the nail. In fact, literally, it means upon the nail. The eponychium is the tissue that covers the new growth of nail plate, and it's the home of the stem cells that make all the cuticle tissue. Also, the outer layer of the proximal nail fold is covered with a tissue whose surface can become keratinized when damaged or injured and will harden to create a highly protective shield that can resist attack by infectious organisms or potentially harmful chemicals. So what is the pterygium and where can it be found? Medical literature defines pterygium as any abnormal growth of skin that becomes stretched into a wing-like shape. In other words, unless the skin is abnormal and it's stretched, then it's not pterygium. The word should never be used to describe the cuticle or any normal growth of skin. Educators, please make sure you use and teach about this term correctly. Medical literature describes a multi-step process that creates the pterygium. Even so, I couldn't find a single diagram that demonstrates how it develops. To my knowledge, this four-part diagram is the first of its kind to visually depict this complex series of events. Don't make the common mistake of thinking pterygium is just overgrowth of cuticle. This is not correct. Researchers who study these problems believe that pterygium occurs because the proximal nail fold becomes fused to the nail matrix. This fusion continues and progresses as shown, often until all of the matrix is just completely destroyed. Once the entire proximal nail fold is fused with the remaining nail plate, the slow continued growth pulls and stretches the proximal nail fold into a triangular shape. This fusion process may continue until eventually all or most of the matrix is destroyed. During the final stages, the skin becomes painful, the nail plate becomes thinner, and the matrix is completely destroyed. Then new nail plate can no longer be made, and eventually the nail plate will be replaced entirely by the proximal nail fold. There is no known way to stop or reverse this process. The nail matrix and the PNF fusion is thought to be triggered by either injury or disease. For instance, burns, physical trauma, overly aggressive manicuring, pedicuring technique, lichen planus, psoriasis, or other medical conditions. Allergic reaction may also be the cause. Repeated constant contact of the proximal nail fold with any type of artificial nail coating material, including all UV cured gels, all monomer liquid formulations and powders, These can all increase the risk of adverse reactions to the proximal nail fold and to the sidewalls. Any condition with an unhealthy appearance should be referred to a doctor for examination. Pterygium should not be cut away by a nail technician, since it can bleed and become infected. It can be softened and conditioned, for instance with a hot oil manicure. But remember, the proximal nail fold is not the cuticle. Normally, the thin layer of cuticle tissue on the nail plate sits between the proximal nail fold and the nail plate to create an important barrier or a seal against bacteria. This protects the nail matrix from infection that could lead to permanent damage of the nail plate. If left unchecked, it could even spread to the bone. Similar infections can occur to the proximal nail fold and other tissues surrounding the nail plate. Cutting and overly aggressive manicuring or pedicuring techniques of this area can break this tissue seal to allow bacteria to penetrate and cause the nail to become infected. This is why it's so important to carefully manicure and pedicure these areas. Nail technicians should not be intentionally abrading or cutting the skin around the nail plate. Some might believe and teach that the keratinized skin on the proximal nail fold is dead and safe to cut. This is not correct. The underlying tissue contains microscopic capillaries and nerves that are broken by cutting or using an e-file. Pathogens, or infectious organisms, they can gain entry through this damaged tissue, and that can lead to infection. And this damaged tissue is significantly more likely to become permanently allergic to nail coating products through repeated exposure. So clearly, it is not in the client's best interest to intentionally cut or abrade the proximal nail fold. The same advice applies for pterygium. This is not overgrown tissue, cuticle tissue. So don't make that mistake and don't cut it. Please help clear up the confusion. Share this information widely. Be sure to know and to properly use nail anatomy terms. Make sure you're using them correctly. Teach your clients and other nail professionals the facts. It's time for the confusion to end. Now, you can get much more information from my 3-part book series, Face to Face with Doug Schoon, Volume 1 through 3. Each book is very different and crammed with essential information that all nail technicians should understand in order to work properly and safely. Don't be fooled by misinformation or marketing exaggeration. All 3 of these books are available worldwide on Amazon, iTunes, Kobo, Nook, either as printed or ebook. And here's a hint. Order them from your local bookstore using these ISBN numbers, and that can save you money, especially if you live outside the United States.